Thank you, Mr. President. Let me bid a pleasant good day to my Senate colleagues and our visitors in the chamber. Mr. President, I stand up this morning to make my submission on the youth economy bill presented to the House for consideration. It would be remiss of me as a youth myself not to add my voice to that bill. Before I go into my submission, Mr. President, I ask that you allow me some leave to, like the leader of government business, and I was very proud of him that he was able to stand here a few chairs down from me. And again, perhaps because of his love for community and love for sports, congratulate the Young Roots football team for having emerged winners of the Deriso Football Club recently completed competition. Let me just add that the Young Roots Football Club is from my constituency of Beaufort North, and that the second place team as well, the Beaufort North veterans, who also took part in that competition, placed second in that competition. So I want to place on the record my congratulatory remarks to these teams and our thanks for the Deriso League for having invited Beaufort North to participate in that league. And beat them, yes. Mr. President, I also want to place on the record my thanks for persons who continue to engage and to follow the proceedings of the Senate. As a child, I was always very keen to follow the proceedings of the Parliament, but it was always the proceedings of the lower house. So I spent many a summer glued to my TV with my notebook and my dictionary, because many times I could not understand some of the words persons like Honorable Vellon John used. So I sat with my dictionary and my notebook, and for me it was a learning experience. I really learned to grow a greater love for reading and parliamentary procedures and so on, having experienced viewing it. But I was never too keen about Senate proceedings. And I still, in my opinion, find that it may not be the most exciting of the chambers. But as I go around, and last week I had two experiences. I was at two different functions, Mr. President, and persons who I do not know personally walked up to me and had discourse about the proceedings in the Senate and articulated that they actually listen and follow the Senate proceedings. And so this is one to thank them for the words of encouragement that they gave. One lady in particular said to me that no matter where she's in her house, when she hears the president recognizes Senator Shalry, she leaves everything, drops it, and runs to her television. So I just want to say thanks for that. But also to put us in the chamber on alert that St. Lucians here abroad and other persons are following and are listening to what is going on in this honorable house. And so we as senators have a responsibility to ensure that whatever we do, that we do it in a manner that is respectful and in a manner that represents what this august chamber itself represents, Mr. President. I want to also place on record my congratulations for this government on the one-year anniversary on Tuesday, as well as today also marks the one-year anniversary of the swearing-in of Honorable Philip J. Pierre, and I want to again place on the record my congratulations to him on that achievement. Mr. President, I want to again, just before I go into my presentation, having said or having expressed my desire for us as senators to ensure that we continue to maintain that standard of that level of discourse in the Senate, to encourage my members opposite. I notice it has been almost a habit that at 10 o'clock most of the times we're sitting here waiting for especially the opposition members to join the chamber, and I think they are, in my opinion, doing a disservice to this country, and I want to just encourage them. I do not know what the reasons are, they probably legitimize, but I want to just encourage them that we have a responsibility and we must take it seriously. Just after the proceedings started, I happened to go out into the hallway, and whilst the leader of opposition business should have been seated here and perhaps adding his voice to the first bill that was tabled, he was He was posturing in front of the media, Mr. President. And I'm not saying that we should not speak to the media, but we need to be mindful that we also have a responsibility to this honorable house, Mr. President. Mr. President, I want to, as I begin, touch on a few things that were articulated or uttered by the leader of opposition business. And in terms of the argument, Mr. President, about the perhaps what he deems as disrespect in the way that opposition members are treated and so on, Mr. President, I do not know if he appreciates that when the lower house meets on the Tuesday, which is 2 full days before we meet as a Senate, that there may be changes when there are in fact changes that would be made, and then these documents would be sent back to us. As far as my record shows, Mr. President, every member of the Senate received a new copy of the Youth Economy Bill on Wednesday, the 27th of July at 9:01 a.m. And the notation in the email, Mr. President, the notation read, please find the attached Youth Economy Bill. This bill replaces the one previously circulated. And we have to be careful, Mr. President, when we stand in this house to ensure that we represent ourselves in a manner that is true and honest. Mr. President, as I indicated, I am a youth myself, and so of course, from during the campaign and the presentation of the manifesto, the now Prime Minister having spoken very passionately about the creation of the youth economy, I have always really looked forward to the deliberation on that aspect of the economy, Mr. President, and to understand and to see what policies and what programs were being put in place. We are in an era, Mr. President, where the term economy in so many colors, the green economy, the blue economy, the brown economy, the orange economy, Mr. President, and now the youth economy. And the youth economy really looks at how the government or establishing a measure to reduce the gaps between the expectations of the youth, their hopes, their dreams, their realities, and how you can bring all of these things in a very purposeful way that could help the situation that the youth have found themselves in terms of employment, and how you can now give them an incentive and a program, a structure to take themselves out of that situation. And I applaud the government for that gesture, Mr. President. Time and again, this government, Mr. President, proves that they are putting people first, whether it is the youth through the rollout of the youth economy, whether it is the pensioners through increased allocations, whether it's the students, the parents, the elderly through an elderly care program. This government continues to put people first, Mr. President, and I applaud this government for that. The focus for me as it relates to the youth economy and the bill presented before us, Mr. President, is what the establishment of such an agency and a dedicated space for the youth can do to boost the morale of the youth, to give them greater access and to give them greater opportunity. And like the Prime Minister always articulates, Mr. President, the youth economy will give the youth a space to turn their hobbies into entrepreneurship and skills into businesses. And as a young person, Mr. President, every time I hear the Prime Minister speak these specific words, it creates a joy for me that youth will now have an opportunity to do these things, to turn hobbies into entrepreneurship and skills into businesses. Mr. President, I am a certified agro-processor. A cohort of us from the community of VJ, through the VJ Development Committee at the time, got an opportunity to be certified in agro-processing under a program of the then OPSR, which is now TIPA. And Mr. President, I would have loved at the time, so many years ago, I think I was perhaps still at secondary school at the time, I would have loved to have had an avenue and an opportunity to have been able to access the funding, the mentorship and so on that will be available under the youth program, to perhaps have been able to turn my certification into something that would have yielded financial and economic benefit for me and my family and my community, my rural community, Mr. President. And so I very much understand how that program can assist young persons who may have been in the situation I was so many years ago, leaving school from a single family, not being sure whether you could continue schooling because your family does not have the financial support to do that, looking for a job, sending many applications, not sure where to go, and not having the financial backing to start up your own business, even when you've been certified into doing something like agro-processing. Mr. President, again, my focus based on this bill is a dedicated space that will be designed to create employment, opportunities, and ownership for young people. My vision for this agency that is going to be created, guided by this piece of legislation that hopefully will be enacted, is that there is a level of fairness in access, proper dissemination of information, a reduction in the bureaucracy, however not compromising on accountability and transparency, so that every youth in St. Lucia who has a hobby that wants to turn it into entrepreneurship or a skill that needs to turn it into a business will have the same level of access and will not be denied, or will not be, the response will not be determined based on geographical location, political affiliation, family background, or any of these other factors that can cause them not to get access, Mr. President. Mr. President, as I go through this bill and as I listen to the debate in the lower house earlier this week, I could not help but think of the many individuals that I know, persons within my community, persons who I went to school with, my friends, persons who you interact with on a daily basis, who can benefit from what is to be offered under that agency with that piece of legislation, Mr. President. And I think of some persons within my community, cake and treats from Vivacel, a rural community in Bellevue, Mr. President. A young lady who offers some very palatable meals, not necessarily a dedicated space for her to do that, but who really keeps the community together and is able to remove herself from perhaps whatever previous situations and so on, and provide herself with a source of income. Having now an opportunity to have that level of backing, Mr. President, to grow her business, Mr. President, I am very elated at that. I think of Camp Adventure, Jay's Scrumptious Street, and a whole lot of others. Only this morning, Mr. President, a classmate of mine in a social WhatsApp group that we have sent a photo of a lettuce farm, lettuce that are ready to harvest, and asking us if anybody wants to purchase some lettuce, contact me. Mr. President, this piece of legislation and this agency that we are proposing, Mr. President, gives us an opportunity so that persons like that can have the level of support required to move their business from one level to another level, hopefully with the aim to yield better profits, better bottom line, and thus increase the level of the economic situation for individuals, for households, for communities, and for our country as a whole. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Mr. President, we saw a lot of small enterprises springing up, small, new ideas, novel ideas that became necessary in the pandemic, Mr. President. We saw many persons started in the production of face masks. We saw many persons started little grocery delivery services, Mr. President. We saw errand runners. We saw a lot of things budding and beginning because of the COVID-19 pandemic. What it tells us, Mr. President, is that there are a lot of ideas on the ground, and there is a great thrust from our young people to take themselves out of what perhaps is the current economic situation, and they want to move themselves from there. But the question is, how do they do that, Mr. President? And as a government, we are proposing to them a way in which they can do that. Mr. President, I just want to read a message that was sent to me some time ago by a young lady. She's a young lady from the community of Viewfort who owns a fishing vessel. given the situation that the fishing sector has experienced for a couple of years now, she's looking for another avenue. She's a mother, she's very enthusiastic, and she's looking for an additional revenue source. And she sent me a message some time ago to say that it is very hard, and I'm reading almost verbatim here, it is very hard and difficult if you want to start off your own business financially. The banks and credit unions make it so difficult. If you have a young person with an idea, she has a good paying salary and wants to start her own business, the institutions act like the business will fail and they don't really trust it. St. Lucia is a place where dreams fade away. Mr. President, that coming from a young lady in her late 20s, early 30s, who says to me, St. Lucia is a place where dreams fade away. But I, Mr. President, had the opportunity to tell her, don't worry, because I know that the government is working on that piece of legislation to establish a youth economy. And most likely than not, you will now have an opportunity under this program to see your dreams come true. And so I stand there, Mr. President, very proudly today to be part of that debate. Very proudly today to lend my support to this piece of legislation, because I understand too well, Mr. President, what it will do and how it will benefit young persons like Miss Andrea Miller when it comes to the setup of her small business that she has a desire to do, Mr. President. And like the leader of government business indicated, there have been critics, Mr. President. And as a government, we welcome the criticism, because criticism is an avenue to help you grow and to help you better. And the leader of opposition business, Mr. President, he alluded to the fact that this may be a pilot. Of course, things new can be piloted. It's new. There may be scope to change, to tweak, to add, to beef up, to minus. This is really what a pilot is, Mr. President. And so we are not coming here taking the posture that we know it all and we have all the answers magically within a year, Mr. President. This is not the posture of this government. This is a government who understands that things need to be put in place, but we are not purporting to be perfect and we are not purporting to know it all. And so, of course, we welcome the criticism from organizations and from other bodies like the opposition to help build and to help strengthen the legislation that we are presenting. And as I conclude, Mr. President, I cannot help but when I sit in this house and listen sometimes to especially the leader of opposition business say certain things, because I think he seems to be forgetting himself sometimes, who says that and also the leader of opposition in the lower chamber, that this bill is coming to the House 1 year later, but 5-6 years later we were promised bananas to friends, we were promised reduced gas. The document was already seated on his desk and it has not been done. But 1 year into this administration, a promise made to the youth of this country, who form a significant part of the electorate, not just in numbers, but in terms of the ability of the youth to move and make things happen in this country. The use of social media, especially, Mr. President, was very prevalent leading up to the last election. It simply says that the youth of this country have a say in what is happening in this country, and to give them that level of opportunity, Mr. President, I applaud the government for it, Mr. President. And so I want to submit my approval for this bill being presented, Mr. President, and I look forward to it being rolled out. I look forward to the agency being set up, like I said, in a manner that is accessible, that our young people will feel comfortable and will be able to, and I will always continue to reiterate the words of the Prime Minister, to be able to turn their hobbies into entrepreneurship and their skills into businesses, because I think this is something that is very much needed in St. Lucia, especially given, I think we understand very well the external shocks that we've been experiencing, but if we can encourage our youth, give them an opportunity to start their own businesses, Mr. President, I think it will lend to that level of resilience that we require as a country so that we can create a buffer when these external shocks hit our doors, Mr. President. And so I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to submit on this bill before us, Mr. President. I thank you.